Hey, on today's episode, we are going to be talking about in network versus out of network. We're going to get some pros and cons. We're going to be talking about private equity, EBITDA multiples. What are the pros and cons of these different models? We're going to talk about reimbursement, regulation, compliance, ease of getting paid, models that scale or don't scale. We're going to get into all that. I'm Dave Kittle, owner of Concierge Pain Relief and the CEO at the Fieldmaker Group. We're currently speaking with practice owners in regards to partnering or acquiring some or all of their practice. And today we have Amit Gaglani back on the show. He's a physical therapist and a previous practice owner. He had sold 4 locations to Alliance Physical Therapy Partners and worked with them in growing their platform. Amit, welcome back on the show.
Thank you, Dave. Great to see you. And I could tell you your viewers really like what you're doing because I got some calls and I got some emails afterwards saying that that was a great show. So you have a well-dedicated audience. That's awesome.
Excellent. But when you were on the show before, I was really sick. I could barely talk. We still did the episode. You talked 95% of the time. So I'm glad that we were able to make that happen. And therefore, whoever reached out to you, it was because of you, man. It was because of the value that you brought on that episode. So we appreciate you coming back on.
Yeah, unfortunately, you weren't feeling so good. Instead of being a dialogue, it was a monologue. I had to use
Yeah.
your facial expressions just to keep it going. That's great.
No, you did great. So one of the things that you and I talked about either before or after that show and then over email was in network and out of network. Your previous practices that you had sold to and partnered with and then sold to Alliance were in network practices in New Jersey. I have a mobile concierge practice where we're out of network and private pay. So there's some differences that we can get into today. But one of the things that you had said recently or previously was that you had looked at these different practices and you had looked at out of network practices and those models. So as just like an initial jumping off point, like you sold 4 of those locations, they were in network to Alliance. You've been in the game long enough. You still obviously have a lot more entrepreneurial energy and you're helping practice owners. I forgot to mention at AG Management. So management consulting and helping practice owners grow and scale. So why had you started looking into out of network in the first place? Maybe that'll just be like an initial jumping off point.
Yeah, so I was a small practice owner trying to survive in this big world of insurances and things like that, and I just felt like it was very difficult when insurance reimbursement's not changing, but your cost of your staff is changing faster. The cost of paper is changing faster. Year after year, the cost of doing business started to increase faster than the cost of reimbursement would increase, which means you just have to just continue to scale and add more patient volume, add more therapists, but your margins are smaller. And I said, there's got to be a better way. Let me look into this out of network model. And so I started actually, doing a deep dive into it and started seeing the different models out there and seeing the different reimbursement models.
Right. And a lot of the practice owners that watch or listen, I think predominantly are in network. I just want to give
Yeah.
a quick definition about out of network because then there's this whole cash-based physical therapy world that's been growing probably the past 5 or 10 years more and more and more physical therapists, PTs, OTs, et cetera, are branching out on their own, maybe a side hustle or whatever. And some of them, I just want to clarify the definition and terms. So some of them will say, oh yeah, I'm out of network. And then when you ask them or you talk to them or whatever, they're charging, let's say, I don't know, 150 per visit or 200 something dollars per visit from the patient, the client directly. And then they give that patient or client over email or whatever, they give them a super bill of the ICD-10 codes and the CPT codes. And they say, that's my rate. You pay it. Here's the super bill. Here's the receipt. You can fax it, upload this to your insurance portal and try to get reimbursement consideration. And some of those therapists will call themselves out of network. And I would say that's not out of network. That is cash-based physical therapy or private pay or fee for service, whatever you want to call it. And for us with out of network, we actually have a medical biller and, we verify benefits and then the patient or client pays towards the deductible. And then once their deductible is hit, then their cost per visit might be their $30 in-network copay or whatever. It depends on the plan, right? So I just wanted to define some of those terms before we get started.
Yeah, well, you definitely defined it, but I will have to say this from an insurance standpoint, you're out of network with that insurance because you're not a participating provider. So if the patient is trying to get reimbursed, you are viewed as an out-of-network person. Now, you're a cash-based practice because whatever they do with the bill, they do with the bill. If they don't submit the bill, as long as they're paying you your 150, they're paying you your 150. Now, if they go and try to get reimbursed, they're going to say, well, Dave Kittle's out of network, so he's not, then your out-of-network benefits, go into practice, and whatever their deductible is and whatever their policies are, that is out of network. I totally get what you're saying. You're cash based. That's how your practice model works. You're not billing the insurance company. Whereas other companies are saying we are out of network, we are going to access your out of network benefits. So,
Right, right. Exactly. Okay. So now you had looked at out of network because of some of those things, right? So cost over time, cost increase, inflation, rent, everything, labor, taxes, everything increase over time. Reimbursement for all or most in-network physical therapy practices has either plateaued or in some cases maybe declined, or there's Medicare cuts or whatever. So you're saying that was like your initial point as to why you started to kind of research and investigate out of network.
yeah, I mean, for those of you that follow business books and things, there's a guy named Stephen Covey who wrote business books out there, and he had said that there's no margin, there's no mission. So when you're in network and your margin is so small because your cost of labor is going up and your reimbursement is so low, and you have to see multiple patients, 3, 4 patients in an hour to get a reimbursement that makes sense for you to stay in business, your margin is really slim. You get patients that cancel on a Friday and you're like, there goes all my profit for the whole week. It's just gone. I just basically had everybody working just so, I can pay their salaries. You feel like you're getting beaten up by insurance companies. And then you see the out of network model and you're like, well, how do I access these out of network benefits? What is a model that could work? How do I do it? So I started looking into those things. For me, I ended up staying in network with it just because I realized that my offices were not in a location that's probably going to support out of network, because people will come and say, well, wait, my financial burden is going to be more if I go out of network than in network. I get it. You're providing a better service than in network. But if the clientele can't or is not willing to afford it, then it became a harder model. My cost of acquiring those patients that had the out of network benefits was going to go up significantly. So I had to say no to more people, and to the ones I finally get, meaning your cost of acquisition goes up. So then does your existing space, and if you're already locked into a lease that has 5,000 square feet and you're like, wait a second, I have a cost of this, can I switch models like this? If you're starting a practice and you're analyzing, it's one thing. But if you already have an office space that you're already locked into a lease and you already know that you're paying whatever it is, per month, $10,000 a month. And you're like, wait a second, now my cost is going to go up. My volume is going to go down. Yeah, I'm going to get paid more, but can I make this transition is the key factors.
Yeah. Let me double click on something that you mentioned just a minute or so ago about the potentially different of the quality care, or maybe maybe there's more time with the therapist or something.
Yeah.
A lot of practice owners that are watching or listening, if they're in network, they might get irritated saying, well, yeah, we might see 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever patients per hour, but we have some aides or PTAs or whatever. And, everyone's getting quality care. Everyone's getting manual therapy. Everyone's getting FaceTime with their physical therapist, whatever. But you mentioned there's a difference. And now for us, there's a clear difference for us because we're sending our therapist to someone's home or office or their home gym in Manhattan in their building or whatever. And it is a one-on-one 60-minute visit. There's no other aides or PTAs or anything like that. What do you say to a practice owner that's watching or listening that just got irritated by saying, well, we provide a great experience, and you're saying the only way I could do so or a better experience is if we were out of network?
Yeah. So I would say that if you're a practice owner, you have the burden of making sure that you're making enough money to pay your staff, pay your overhead, have a marketing budget, and have that. And if you're out of network, or if your reimbursement, let's just say, is higher, forget about in network, out of network. Let's say your reimbursement is higher, it's easier to achieve your goals. Now, if your reimbursement is higher, and then you say, okay, even though my reimbursement's higher, I still want to see 2 to 3 or 3 patients an hour and still provide that quality care, then that's great. In my facilities, we used to see 2 to 3 patients an hour. Obviously not when Medicare patients are there, but we used to see 2 to 3 patients an hour. And every in-network provider knows it's not like that every single hour of the day. There's like clumps where it happens, But I have noticed that in a lot of the out-of-network models, some people will do one every half hour, and that's their methodology. And the reason why is because they're making enough money on that they have more margin there. So they're okay with providing that. Now, they will say they're providing more quality care and they're doing it. But, I guess that's here nor there. It's just that when you're a practice owner, you want to make more and you want to be able to survive in practice.
Yeah. There was something that you mentioned, I think on either the first episode or maybe you mentioned it in a pre-interview sometime. where when you were talking about in-network versus out-of-network, you said something about like apples to apples, like the like patients or the consumers they don't understand the difference. They just think like in-network, like do you take my insurance? They go
Yeah.
to a place that takes their insurance and they don't have anything to compare it to in a lot of cases, right?
Yeah. So depending on the benefits, what we've noticed over time is out of network benefits have increased, meaning not increased in a way that they have more coverage, but increased in a way that their deductibles have gotten higher. So the threshold to see them and how much they have to start paying out of their pocket, they have to cover, let's say, first $5,000 out of pocket. Now, this patient may have gone and had surgery, and by the time they get to you, they've already met their out of network deductible. So that whenever they come to you, you're making it's all gravy. But for those people who start therapy in January and they're accessing their out of network benefits and they have a $5,000 deductible and you're an out of network provider and you decide that, what's common in your area, because I mean, I don't know how everybody else does it, but the way you're supposed to come up with your fees is you're supposed to look at this book that basically tells you, what is common charges in your area at a certain percentile level. And you come up with the charges and then you bill them. And then if you're billing them, and let's say you're billing $200 a session, well, that patient's going to be responsible for that pure $200, if their out of network deductible is different than their in network deductible. Every plan is different. If you have a plan that has the same exact benefits, then it makes no difference to the patient, right? It just comes to quality of care. If their out of network deductible is very small, then it is going to come out of their pocket more. And for some people, that may not be a factor because they feel like, hey, everybody here is out of network. So this is just what the common model is. Like in Manhattan, a lot of places are just out of network. So it's just, everybody just knows that that's what it is.
Yeah. And I'm glad you touched on that because I'm in Brooklyn. We have a lot of patients in Manhattan. You're in Manhattan now, but I think for the most part, you had practiced and worked in New Jersey. So kind of like the New York City area. I will preface it, and I mentioned on other episodes, like I understand that the cost of living here is higher. There's a lot of, jobs and opportunities here where people can afford this type of thing. They can afford to pay multiple visits of $250 per visit or something until they hit their deductible, and then maybe they drop down to a lower cost. And I understand that there's socioeconomic issues in other states and other places in the country that this model just like may not even work, right? So I always like to preface that because I'm just kind of, you and I were kind of just talking about like what we know and what we've seen, but we know that we can't just like paint it with a wide brush across the whole US or like every state.
When I do talk to practice owners, I will tell you that the out of network ones are like New York, New Jersey area. I don't hear about it as much in other areas. They have no clue what I'm talking about if I bring it up. So I feel like it's definitely more prevalent in our, tri-state area here, probably New York, New Jersey more than anywhere else. Then again, we have such high patient density. So, you can actually be okay by saying no.
Right.
Well, so from just taking it.
So from your experience, how would you're a therapist, a previous practice owner. Again, you're in this New York City area with me. So just from your experience, because it's going to be different somewhere else, but how would you compare the value of these two models? Whether you're looking at it, like you mentioned some of the things of like from the practice owner side. So like higher margin per visit, like more reimbursement per visit on average. That's why we are out of network and we bill out of network insurances, but we currently don't take Medicare and we don't take any in network at all. Because I'm paying my therapist like $80, $90, $100 per visit.
Right. So if you're getting paid $60 a visit, you can't, there's no way you can, do that. Plus your scenario is one-on-one. You're truly one-on-one. There is no one else there. It's like you and the therapist and the patient and the therapist. So that patient feels like they're getting the royal treatment because it's just that one-on-one service. And those are the key niches anywhere. Like if you're providing a service that no one else is providing in your area and everyone else who can't afford to do that service because they can't do it. Like, let's say lymphedema, maybe that's a good example. Maybe that's a bad example. Maybe there's no great in-network facilities that are small because they can't afford to treat one patient at a time because the reimbursement isn't there. So the guy says to himself, I'm a practice owner. I can't afford to deliver this service for, this insurance to pay me $40. Where an out of network, I'm going to be charging $200 because I'm going to give that 1 hour just to that one patient, even when they come into my clinic. So I have to be out of network to deliver this service, and that's a business structure that they decide that they have to do. Or places that I can't deliver this type of service here. I can't afford to deliver lymphedema.
Right. So you have not spoken to a lot of practice owners outside of this area in regards to out of network. So we're a
I
little.
have.
Oh, you
I
have.
have.
Okay.
Oh, I have personally. I've talked to people in California. I've talked to other places. California definitely does it. I have some friends that own practices over there, and they have actually, some offices. They have two different companies. One is an in-network company, and one is an out-of-network company. There's all these different strategies that just
Yep.
sometimes they fly under the radar, and we see it in New Jersey too when it comes to the way that the billing is done and things like that. But yeah, it's hard to have these type of the way these are structured to try to expand it over many, many, many facilities because there's just too many nuances that can, blow up.
Yeah, there was an example of that. Michael Gorman has been on the show, I think, two times, and he sold 7 locations to Select Medical years ago, not that maybe 5 or so years ago. And he mentioned this on one of the episodes that he had a similar structure where there was like an in-network entity, like the LLC or
Yeah.
PLLC or whatever, and then there was an out-of-network LLC or PLLC, some other business entity in the same brick and mortar office, and
Yeah.
they would kind of have. I don't know how they did that on the front end, and maybe you have some tips or some ideas there, but like almost like, well, you call in, and if you are dead set on just using your in-network copay, you're in network and you only can pay 30 or whatever dollars per visit, like maybe you get funneled to the in-network entity. I don't know, and like maybe it's your new grads or your whatever staff therapist, and then like
Yeah.
if you want Michael Gorman, the practice owner that is like really experienced and all that, like then to see him, maybe you have to go that in-network or the out-of-network route. I don't know if that's feasible or compliant or legal or ethical or what. I mean, there's a lot of like gray area there.
So there's a lot of gray area. If you ask the insurance company, they do not want that at all. They
Of
do
course,
not want under one company. They won't even allow it. They'll try to do everything they can to go against it. People have one office and they say they have 2 suites. In their mailing address. The one suite supposedly is in network. The other one is out of network. But here's
like
their point of
suite 1 and suite 2, and it's like the same.
right.
Office.
That's right. But here's their point of view, and this is a valid point of view. If you are marketing your services as an in-network provider, and you are taking those patients and then funneling them to your out-of-network arm, then that causes issues. And I don't know if that's even gray area. That's pretty cut and clean from their perspective. They're coming after you because you're kind of, I don't want to say false advertising, but you're kind of saying, hey, come to me. You're dangling this carrot, but then once they come to you, you're saying, hey, go over here. Now, I guess if you're providing a unique and different service that is not covered in network, then maybe you can provide that over onto the other side and say, hey, your coverage plan doesn't allow X, Y, and Z, but we can send you over here and they will cover it. But you'll have to go out of network for this. So then you're providing a distinctly different service than your in-network provider can provide. So then you're saying, yeah, we did send them over there because we're providing a different service and that's what they requested. And they were aware that we were out of network and they were aware of their financial obligations. So insurance companies don't really have as much of a problem as long as you talk to the patient, you let them know their financial obligations. It's when that people play in the gray area and they just tell them, hey, we're collecting your in-network copay, and then they don't collect anything else and their bill just vanishes in thin air, and the patient says, I didn't know I was going out of network. I thought it was in network. No one told me. That's when there's some shady things that happen. And yes, unfortunately, it does happen.
Yes. Now, a few examples. I'm not going to mention any practice names, but we mentioned it in the pre-interview. There are certain practices that have regional scale, pretty big scale, where I have heard from either, 2 touch points or 2 data points anecdotally. One is from a practice where I know the therapist very well, and the therapist used to work for one of these practices. And the second practice was a patient who went to, practice B for 1 or more visits. And then that same patient in the same calendar year, earlier this year, then came to us because they wanted like a convenient home visit and like kind of like an ergonomic assessment and, some back pain, whatever. So then we did the whole out-of-network billing for that second patient, that second person. The therapist that was at this one large regional place and I don't know, there's probably some tricks here where like maybe their website doesn't say in-network. It probably just lists like all the, insurance logos.
That they accept.
That they accept, but they don't say, we're 100% in network with all these plans or whatever. Like they probably remove that. because, as you kind of hinted at, there's these in-network practices or these larger corporates who will charge the patient a flat copay, call it $30, $50, whatever, and say, here's your cost per visit. It's $50, every time you come in. And they will take that $50, but then they bill some of these patients, they'll bill that patient's out-of-network benefits, assuming that they have it. They will try to draw down that out-of-network deductible with the allowable amount. So they might bill $600 or $800 or whatever dollars per visit. They will claim $50 on the copay side. They write off the rest of it. They are telling the patient, they may or may not even say, oh, we're doing in-network versus out-of-network, whatever. The patient doesn't really question it a lot of times because this is U.S. healthcare. And it's like, oh, okay, my cost per visit is $50 and I have back pain and I'm going to this office that's nearby. All right, great. So there's a little bit of this stuff going on in the background. And they will then, it's almost like a lost leader. They might actually lose.
Absolutely.
On the
first 6 visits. First 6 visits, they know they're only making the $50. It's everything they gain after the 6 visits. Because once they've eaten all through the deductible, then they're like, okay, now it's gravy. Now we're actually going to start making money. So we have to provide a great level of service up to those 6 visits because we can't let that person leave us before that. Otherwise, we've just kind of lost all that revenue.
Yes, and let's just in your example of, let's say, the 6th visit, now the out-of-network deductible was hit, whatever it was, $2,000 or what you said, $5,000, whatever. Probably closer to 2, but depends on the allowable amount. And every insurance has a different, allowable amount, which is also crazy on the out-of-network side. So then at the 6th visit, it gets paid down. Now you hope to have that patient continue to come back in your office. And now the reimbursement per visit is like maybe $200 or $300 or sometimes even more, plus the $50 copay. And then at that point, maybe the practice says, oh, your cost per visit is $5 now or 0, or they keep it at 50, whatever. And then, like you said, then it's all gravy, assuming that you're able to keep these patients for the full plan of care, which then goes into all the other things of.
Then it averages out. So at the end of the average, they're like, okay, well, we did $110 a visit or $120 a visit or $130, whatever it is. They end up averaging it out. Yeah. Especially in January, February, they're doing it constantly. Towards the end of the year, that's when they actually, most people have hit their deductibles.
Right.
That's great. So that's.
So that was the one example. The second example is we had this patient earlier this year. They called in, and one of my therapists went to perform the evaluation and treatment in that patient's home. We let them know with, verbally and over text or email of like cost per visit, and we're out of network. We do accept your insurance on an out of network basis. This patient had already hit their out of network deductible for this calendar year for 2023. And then I had heard that the patient had gone to a different large, powerful regional practice who I thought was pretty great and in network, right? And so then the patient like knew, this is like, patients like hardly ever know, because we don't always know about the complexities of insurance and like cost per visit and all that. This patient knew a lot. And I was like, well, this is different. So the patient knew, like, they were able to describe everything to the point of like knowing like the allowable amount and like how much we're going to get reimbursed. And he previously saw like the EOBs, the explanation of benefits from this other practice. And the patient was like, yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be, a really good reimbursement for you guys, because when I went to so-and-so, this other practice, they did the same thing. Like my costs, they billed my out-of-network benefits as well. And I go, wait, this practice that I know, that is, I thought was in network and accepted every insurance, they billed your out-of-network benefits. And then I had asked her, I can't recall the dollar amount, but I asked like, what was the dollar amount that they were charging her? And it was somewhere around like $20 to $50 per visit. So it was kind of like the same example. So in-network copay in that cost range, but then actually billing the out-of-network benefits, which again is this like gray area, which you kind of mentioned, like insurance companies don't want this because they know that we're trying to play this game or milk the system or whatever. And it's kind of like, it may not be totally kosher or compliant, but it's like maybe legal because they do it. I don't know. Like, where do we go from here with this topic?
The funny thing is they say, and if you ask an attorney, they'll say, no, it's actually not legal. it's just like it's like kind of like this. You're speeding until you get caught. So in some cases, doing the examples of the way they're billing and the way they may be doing things, when they get audited, you know, some people are very smart. They get audited and they'll say, look, our system shows we kept billing the patient. The patient just didn't pay, you know.
Correct.
But then if they actually did a really, really deep dive and they say every single one of your patients never paid, like if they really, really come after you, then that's when it's really tough. It's just that for whatever reason, they just don't really push that hard. But if they get fed up or they see something egregious, or here's the one thing that will really get you, everything's hunky dory until they start getting patient complaints. If they start getting patient complaints, they will 100% look very deep into you. If a patient says, hey, you know what, these guys were overbilling me, these guys were doing this or that, or the service was not what they said, they billed me, you know, here's my EOB, it says $600. I didn't get those type of services. All of a sudden, they're going to be like, we need to start inquiring. And then once they start inquiring, they're going to keep you, you know, on tab. They're going to keep you like, okay, we have to keep looking at this patient or this clinic. You know, you're on their blacklist. But there's been some big, very large companies that were out of network and that later negotiated to get in network. And I will tell you, there are some that were very egregiously billing that were denied in network status. They might be seeing thousands of patients a week. And then when they tried to get in network, they said, nope, you're blacklisted. We're not letting you in network.
Wow. Wow. Well, again, these examples of these mostly in-network practices sometimes doing this almost like a, I don't know,
Well,
not necessarily a double dip. It's like they're trying to chase that better
right.
reimbursement, and it's that risk of like they lose some money on the front end, but like it's definitely
I will
something
tell
that
you,
goes on.
if somebody's looking for the right way and they say, well, I'm out of network, I like the way I do things, you know, I want to stay out of network, my advice would be just to do everything above board. When the patient comes in, clearly tell them their financial responsibility, clearly let them know that this is an out of network clinic, this is how we bill, this is how we do things, and have your charges that are always consistent, you know, and use I think it's an Ingenix book, that's one of them, I forget the other one book, that says, you know, like you could be at 80th percentile of charges and you're fine as long as that's what's normal in your community, in your area. You can't charge $600 a visit when everybody else is charging 150, let's say. And then that puts you at like, it makes the patients get pissed off too. Even the patient knows that they're not paying this, but somebody's paying this, and everybody knows the cost of healthcare is going up. It just takes some time before somebody gets paid. Now, I will tell you, in New Jersey, some of the insurance companies were catching wind of this, and they weren't sending the payments to the clinic. They would send the patients to the patient, and the patient would be like, "Oh, that was just money that I got. Had my name."
Sending the payment, the reimbursement to the patient.
Yes, yes. The insurance check would never come to the actual clinic. It would come to the patient because they said you opted for an out of network clinic and yada, 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 whatever reason they chose. But then all of a sudden the patient is getting this huge check. And depending on their financial means, they're like, well, we needed that money, so we cashed it.
So
what are you going to do?
In New York, Blue Cross Blue Shield is the only one that does this. And so what we do is everyone else, Cigna, United Healthcare, Oxford, Aetna, we're all hooked up with EFT. So that just goes right into the bank account. Blue Cross Blue Shield, at least in New York, I don't know how it is anywhere else.
Same in Jersey.
For out of network, they mail the checks to the patient. And this is the reimbursement for, you know, like you said, the example of like once, you know, 6 visit or whatever. Then from visit 7 and on, if their cost per visit is, you know, 30 or $50 or whatever, then they get a check. That dollar amount is for all those visits that we were just collecting the copay level range. So we tell them up front, we let them know over email. We have them sign an informed consent or a financial consent form that says you have Blue Cross Blue Shield. They are the only ones in New York that we know of that will mail our payment reimbursement addressed, a check addressed to you and your home address, but just letting you know that this check, this dollar amount is our payment reimbursement. We're sorry for the confusion, but Blue Cross Blue Shield is the only one that does it. And at that point, before they even start with us, they have also already signed our other intake paperwork, which includes the 24-hour cancellation policy and a card on file. So we will already have a credit or debit card on file. And in that description of the Blue Cross Blue Shield financial consent is if you're not able to, if you accidentally cash that check and you don't return those funds via Venmo or PayPal or endorse the check over to us or whatever. If you deposit it and you forget about it and you shred the check or whatever, we have to get those funds. And so the worst case scenario would be we run their card, we eat the credit card fees and we lose a little bit there, but we will already have that credit card on file before they even start visit number one.
Yeah.
And knowing that they get that check later, it could be it could be 1, 2, 3 months down the road. But all that comes back to like communication and just managing expectations up front.
And you also put systems in place, right? You put systems in place. The unfortunate part of what I see a lot, and you probably too, the amount of paperwork we give these patients to fill out, they don't even know half the time what they're signing. They just get so tired of reading it, they're just signing it away. So then later you tell them, wait, look, you signed this thing saying you were going to get this payment. They're like, I have no recollection of signing any of that stuff. But you're always going to get the one-off person that, cancels the credit card, cashes the check, and then you're like obviously chasing them. Is that the majority? No, there's no way of, it's like, even if you go in network and you bill them the deductible and they just never pay, then you're chasing after them. So that's going to happen either way. But I think as long as you're above board and you're clearly communicating everything, I think that's probably the way to go. And then you have to model your practice based on the average reimbursement that you need to survive on. And, based on your expenses and your specialty, if you're providing a unique special service that others in your area are not. Otherwise, if you're out of network providing the same exact service, same exact patient load, same exact everything as an in-network one, what is your differentiating factor? How are you going to differentiate yourself to make sure that you're continuously getting the business? You have to be providing something better than what everybody else is providing to be able to tell patients, hey, come to me and pay for me.
Right. If there's a practice owner watching or listening and they're in network, should they consider dropping their lowest paying payer on the in-network side and or going out of network? So whether you drop a payer and, like, for example, Oscar Healthcare and Humana don't have out-of-network benefits. At least over the past several years, at least the plans that we've checked, like, they just never have out-of-network benefits, and they may not have any at all. So when someone calls in, we let them know that, whatever. Should a practice owner potentially get some coaching from you or someone else in regards to dropping their lowest payer that maybe is on the borderline of not even covering their cost per visit, and or taking, like, United Healthcare, that in-network is apparently a pain and the reimbursement is getting lower and lower, and or maybe just take United Healthcare and drop from in-network to out-of-network? What are some maybe tips or strategies just for some like quick wins and takeaways for practice owners?
Yeah, I would definitely look at how many patient volume you're getting from each and realize that if you're dropping one that is a lower reimbursed, but you're getting majority of your volume, that all of a sudden now your volume is going to drop tremendously. And depending on how your costs are and your staffing, are you willing to change your whole model? If you have 5 or 6 staff and now you're dropping your lowest payer, which happens to be your highest volume, you're not going to be able to afford that staff. And if that's okay with you and you want to do that because your goal is to get margin, then just understand that that's great. But a 5 practice or a 5 therapist location has a large size that you still have to feed, you still have to pay the lease. So you just have to do an analysis based on how much volume are you getting from the insurances. And if you're getting low volume and it's low reimbursement, then
it's easier.
That's an easy decision, right? Then you say, well, I'm going to go out of network with this one. So, or you're already saying, hey, it's already really low. This one just kind of adds in and increases my productivity. So maybe I'll just add it in. So I guess it's an analysis. I did a similar analysis that, just to keep you on a little longer, just to tell you this, I actually took Medicaid for a while because either they sent me a contract that they didn't understand and the reimbursement was very, very high. And we started getting, we were getting paid for a year and a half to 2 years at a really high reimbursement. And then they realized that they did something wrong. For some stupid reason, they decided that 97530 was not a PT code, that that's an OT code. And we're like, no, take a look at Medicare rules. They're like, no, we don't view it as that. This is how we view it. So then all of a sudden they're like, no, we're not paying this code anymore. So all of a sudden the reimbursement kind of dropped, but we were taking a lot of that volume in. And then we're like, okay, well, let's just continue right now. But we realized that the volume wasn't worth it because we just couldn't keep up with it. So we immediately dropped that one too.
So in that situation, did Medicaid ask for any payments, retro payments, and take money back, or say
they wanted to take a look at things? And once they looked at things, they said, as long as you code properly for the treatment that you're delivering, and they want to look at the treatment, and they say, yeah, your notes indicate that you're doing this, then they just left that alone. But going forward, they're like, well, we can't continue to do this. So whatever stupid reason or mistake that they made, they weren't going to continue it. So that changed the overall analysis on how we had to kind of look at things. But for that short period of time, it was what it was.
What are your thoughts on in-network practices potentially adding more cash pay services, whether it's laser, traction, hyperbaric oxygen chamber, red light therapy?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many other things. We use a device called the Stim Pod for pulse radio frequency for pain relief and nerve treatment. And it's awesome. It's a great device. I did an episode about it here. Those types of services and offerings, or maybe it's like a peripheral neuropathy program or a sports, whatever, sports performance, whatever program. What are your thoughts on, and I don't mean any disrespect to any in-network practices watching or listening, but like potentially using the in-network, not necessarily as a loss leader, but as a way to get people into your world, into your orbit, let them experience like your team and all that. And just say like, hey, like, oh, your goals are to do this, that, and the other. Like we have this service or this offering and it's X amount of dollars and either your insurance doesn't cover it or we don't bill your insurance for this because of, maybe there's no IC or there's no CBT code or whatever. Go ahead.
I will tell you that's an excellent question because I looked at it. I said, wait, we have all these patients. I want to be able to provide them services that maybe are not covered and that they're willing to still pay cash for these type of things. I will say to anybody looking at that, take a look at your contracts because different insurances will say, these are the things that some of the contracts will say almost everything is covered, meaning you have to provide every single service and that's part of your in-network reimbursement. They basically will say whatever you do is going to be covered under this dollar amount. They won't say, hey, if you charge ultrasound and we don't cover ultrasound, they're going to say whatever you do, you're getting a payment of, let's say, $69 per visit. That covers all services. So you're like, wait, what is not covered? They're like, everything is covered under that fee.
Yeah, but what does that mean? Like any potential therapy or medical procedure?
Anything that's considered, physical therapy procedure would be covered under that. That has a code, right? It has to have a code for it. Like if you're charging continuous e-stim while ultrasound, or if you can and you're thinking, oh, well, they don't cover for this. So, I can charge them for this. The insurance companies on the contracts will say, no, it's actually covered. If we're paying you $69 to deliver up to 1 hour's worth of therapy, whatever you do during that session is part of it. There's nothing that's excluded.
I thought it was more if it was medically necessary and whatever the definition in that contract of what's medically necessary.
So you're basically saying that you're trying to provide something that's not medically necessary. So therefore that you want to charge the patient.
So here's an example. You know how people are like, I want a massage, and they think like a lot of physical therapists just do like massage the whole time. Well, if a patient calls into your office or they call into us or whatever, and they're expecting 45 to 60 minutes of manual therapy or myofascial release or joint moves or whatever, whatever you want to call it, all that, maybe we say, well, we can't bill your insurance. It's not, your insurance will maybe only reimburse us. I don't know. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing this out there. 2 units per visit of manual therapy. And then like the third unit or fourth unit is either zero or it's like, takes a big hack because of like, there's like some Medicare rule where like the follow-on third or fourth codes or units get like a hit and they like get, chopped down a bit. So whether it's, medically necessary, if someone has back pain and they want a 60-minute session of manual therapy, I don't think a lot of insurances will pay a lot of visits where every visit is 3 or 4 units of manual therapy. I think they want more like a mix of the therapeutic intervention and therapeutic activity and maybe some.
I get what you're saying, but then here's the thing that anybody that's doing this has to consider. Your notes have to be written in such a way that if the patient ever comes back and complains and say they took additional money from me, I went to an in-network facility and I'm only supposed to pay a $20 copay, but they were taking $60 because they were charging me for other services. And this doesn't happen right away. It's afterwards when they start talking to their friends and somebody gets pissed off later and makes a complaint that if they were ever to audit your stuff, they can sit there and you can somehow prove that 2 units of manual therapy was sufficient, yet this person wanted more. How you do that in your notes, I actually don't know myself, because the insurance company will say, well, we never denied you. You could have billed 3 or 4 units. We never said no. Show us anywhere that we said no. there's the thing that, or you could say, well, it was our professional opinion that they didn't need it. Well, then it just calls the question. Where if you're doing a service that is just completely different, and I don't even know, because you can't even say needling, or let's say acupuncture. Acupuncture is not usually something we do, so you can charge it for that if you're not
Right.
doing dry needling and you have an acupuncturist. But if you're doing a service that's maybe completely different, that is not even provided by the therapist, then it's clear.
Well, what about laser or red light therapy? Because I don't think there's any treatment codes, and I don't know of any insurances that are paying for it. So if there's no reimbursement for these types of procedures, which are in the health and wellness world, but it's not necessarily medical or therapeutic. I mean, it is, but
Yeah.
if there's no CPT code for it, or if these payers are not paying for laser for one of these laser treatments, I mean, a ton of practices charge out of
Then
pocket for it,
yes.
so it's fine.
Yeah, you can definitely do it. Just make sure that you look at your individual contract for the individual insurances before you decide to go down that route, before you decide to take any extra money from an in-network provider, because once they lodge a complaint, that's when the insurances start going crazy. As long as you know that you've covered your bases and you looked at that individual contract, if you're an in-network provider and that is definitely not covered, then yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just making sure you cover your bases, because it's like nobody wants the IRS looking at your books, even if you're doing everything right. Nobody wants to go through that.
Right. So we talked about using a little bit more of the in-network as the front end, and then maybe you offer these other services. There's an example. Eric Broadworth was on the show recently, and last year he did almost 200K of revenue just from red light therapy. So there's a couple different, like he's got a red light therapy bed. It looks almost like a tanning bed, and then there's another setup where someone lies supine on a treatment table on a plinth, and there's like some of these like pads and like these things that kind of like go over someone's skin.
These are all he charged money for, and the patients paid him out of it. So obviously you have to have good PTs that know how to sell the service too.
Right, exactly. So, but other than that, once you learn how to do that, those are the opportunities that revenue will never be retroactively taken back, as far as I know, because it's coming out of the patient's pocket. They're saying yes, they're raising their hand saying yes, I'm interested in that, and I think there's enough research or reviews and testimonials or whatever, that it seems like it would help me reach my goals sooner, and it would help with my therapy and recovery and all that. And so it seems like there's a little bit of that in our future in the profession, where practice owners can maybe sleep better at night with these out-of-pocket services, which I know may not be possible in every state or every zip code or every area. I understand that. But for the areas where it's possible, practice owners can't get squeezed there. In fact, they can increase their rates year over year to kind of keep it up with inflation and everything else.
It's kind of like us selling products inside the PT facility. You're selling TheraBands, you're selling different things. If you can increase your average reimbursement per patient by adding different things in that can be beneficial to the patient, you're charging them for something but it's still beneficial to them. Somebody comes into you for frozen shoulder, you're saying, okay, do all these exercises, but I need you to buy these pulleys so you can do them at home. We charge $25. You can buy them here, or you can go search for it on your own. But we highly recommend that you do this 3 times a day when you're not here. The patients still get value from it. They get a faster recovery time, and you're selling a product to them.
Right. Let's wrap things up with some private equity and multiples really quick. So pre-interview, you mentioned private equity. What did you say, that they love or hate out of network? What's your experience with this?
The general consensus after me talking to many different private equity people that have PT in it, they generally like in network. They understand it a lot better. They feel more comfortable with it. They feel like it's something that they can build upon without a law changing or something changing in the works of billing and things like that. They just feel like it's more of an even keel platform. So they like it when it's in network. Now, I know, and that there's been some out of network or PE companies that bought some out of network facilities, but I also know through the grapevine that they're scrambling around sometimes afterwards, trying to figure things out.
And I asked you why in the pre-interview in terms of like in network and with private equity companies and firms. And you mentioned a couple things about compliance and the ease of getting paid and some reimbursement considerations and regulation, and easier to scale. I understand that. That's obvious. Like easier to scale an in-network practice, or a PE firm buys a practice that has 20 or 25 locations or 50 or whatever. and it's easy for them to bolt on, your practices and other practices that are already in network, because it's just like you're just adding to it. It's already doing the core business model. And for a private equity firm, they want scale, and for scale, you have to have an offering that is the most accessible, right? Which would be the lower cost, which typically would be in network.
This is correct, 100%. And then their idea is that they'll just negotiate higher reimbursement, which I've seen them do. So then for them, why would you even consider going out of network if you can, negotiate higher reimbursements?
Got it.
Network.
Any final thought or recap for this in network versus out of network? I mean, we covered a lot. We can't cover everything. We certainly could do a part 2 if the audience is interested. But
I think for your people, I think for your people who are out of network and they have a business model that works out of network, then they should just continue it, and they should just look at their systems to see, are they making sure that they're providing good, clear language to their patients, that nobody can ever come back and say, hey, I wasn't told this, or I didn't know about this, because then that becomes something that they have to be concerned about in an audit. For your people who are in network, who are like struggling, they may want to consider the out of network. And when they do consider out of network, they need to know where they're located. Will out of network be something that somebody would go for and pay those prices in their area? Do the demographics, afford for that? Or what service can I provide that is so unique that people will pay for it?
Right. Amit, perfect place to pause. The audience can reach you to learn more about how you can help them at AG Management Consulting. What's a good place, whether email, website, LinkedIn? How should the audience reach out to you to learn more?
So if you don't mind, in your show notes, maybe putting my email, the Amit.Gaglani at agmgmtinc.com, so they can reach out to me there. That's probably the best way. They can follow me on Facebook. It's, Amit Gaglani, that's there. And then LinkedIn, they can look my name up, Amit Gaglani, OCS, and find me there as well. I post stuff every once in a while about different PT stuff that I'm doing and other things that AG Management is up to, or different conferences that we go to that are cool.
Got it. So it sounds like in-network won this battle, but Amit, this was great. I really appreciate your time for the conversation, kind of weighing the pros and cons and the differences. And there are some differences, and then obviously a lot of overlap. And I hope that this is helpful and valuable to the audience. Go ahead.
I won't agree that it won. I will agree that it's a method, and I will also agree it's your business strategy should be the winner. Your business strategy should be the one that defines what you want to do. So you could have a great out of network business strategy as long as you've thought about it and put the key things in place. Then you're a winner.
Awesome. To the audience, if you find this interesting and valuable or helpful in any way, subscribe to the Dave Kittle Show on YouTube, and also check us out on iTunes and Spotify. We'll catch you next time here on the show. Amit, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Dave Kittle. Are you a healthcare business owner or physical therapy practice owner who is looking to figure out your succession plan or exit strategy? We might be able to help. And in fact, we may be interested in acquiring your practice. If you're interested, you can reach out to me. Shoot me an email at dave@conciergepainrelief.com. That's DAVE@CONCIERGE painrelief.com. Or you can call me at any time, 646-781-8884.